Will Elder Scrolls 6 actually be better than Skyrim? Since the announcement trailer 6 years ago, Bethesda has developed a few games, none of which will have really hit the mark. First with the release of Fallout 76 and the most recent game Starfield, which is currently sitting at mixed reviews on Steam, with the game also feeling somewhat outdated in comparison to the competition. So like others, I do have some concerns with how Elder Scrolls 6 may shape out. But first, let's set the context of this video. I really want to focus on what I believe has made Skyrim such a long-lasting and well-beloved game. And that of course would be the modding scene. I will go over some games that have a sizable modding community and cover why some of these games' design choices limit their modding potential. However, at the same time, go over what Bethesda should learn from these games for the Elder Scrolls 6 and what I would really want to see for it to surpass Skyrim. When taking a look at Nexus Mods, the go-to website for modding, I want to focus on two games that I believe to be the closest to the capability of modding of a Bethesda game, and these two will be Baldur's Gate 3 by Larian Studio and Cyberpunk 2077 by CD Projekt Red. I've not included Stardew Valley despite being one of the bigger modding communities, as the game isn't remotely close to Skyrim. But first, let's compare Baldur's Gate 3's modding scene to Bethesda's most recent game Starfield. With both games being released roughly around the same time, Baldur's Gate 3 has actually more mods released for the game. At the time of writing this video, Baldur's Gate 3 currently sits at around 11.6k mods uploaded to Nexus, with 72 new mods uploaded this week, while Starfield only has 9.8k with 32 mods uploaded this week. I bring this up to indicate the importance of creating an enjoyable world-designed game. Baldur's Gate 3, simply being a more beloved and popular game, has seemingly drawn in more modders despite Starfield having a higher modding capability. I think this is why it's critical that Elder Scrolls 6 can simply be a game of a high modding capacity like Starfield, but what we really need is a fundamentally good game, acting as a strong foundation for modders. With that said, let's take a look at the gameplay of both these games and what Bethesda can take away from them. Many would say both games have a much more engaging combat system. Even during Skyrim's initial release, the combat was always lacking, feeling a bit underwhelming, with melee combat feeling like you were just flailing your sword around and the magic system not quite having as much punch and impact as it needed. This was the main reason that most people enjoyed playing stealth archers in Skyrim. The issue with this is of course Skyrim should be designed to allow any playstyle feel fluid and impactful to play. Of our two games, with Cyberpunk being the closest to Skyrim's gameplay, there's definitely some takeaways that would be great to see in Elder Scrolls 6. Now, I don't want to show gameplay footage of Cyberpunk, a recently released game versus Skyrim, a game that is over a century old, as this would be a little unfair. So instead, let's make this more interesting and put it up against Starfield. To go one step further, to keep things as even as possible, the footage I'm showing of Cyberpunk is from its initial release. Yes, that's Cyberpunk, the buggy game that was initially released, and even this gameplay is still leaps above Starfield's gameplay. If we were to use gameplay of Cyberpunk from 2024, it will completely blow Starfield away. Also, ironically, I was trying to find gameplay footage for this video. Initially, I just wanted to show some late game footage from Starfield, but when I was searching for combat gameplay on Starfield, the first few and most popular videos was actually making fun of Starfield's combat, and some of which, like I'm doing today, pairing it with Cyberpunk's combat. Interestingly enough, as I scrolled down a bit, I found this video, and yes, it is basically Skyrim's stealth archer build. Now moving on to dialogue and writing, comparing Baldur's Gate 3 with Skyrim, both being fantasy role-playing games, there's a lot of innovation and game design that Bethesda can take away from Baldur's Gate 3. The way Baldur's Gate 3 basically revolutionizes choices in questing is unmatched. The way it handles NPCs is leaps and bounds beyond Skyrim and Starfield. What I really want to see in Elder Scrolls 6 is dialogue and writing which feels more meaningful and natural.
There's been word of suspicious behavior from someone matching your description. No, you match the description. No, you match the description. No, you match the description.
I don't think Bethesda needs to go to the level of in-depth choices that Baldur's Gate 3 does. However, a good step up would be to ensure that the dialogue gives you meaningful outcomes to your choices and not just be for the sake of it, with each option resulting in a similar or the same outcome. Now, with that said, will either of these games catch up or overtake Skyrim when it comes to the modding scene? With Baldur's Gate 3 only being released a year ago, we still need to give it a little bit more time before we can tell, but I do want to go over some of the game design choices that may keep them from overtaking Skyrim in the modding scene. None of these design choices are bad. In fact, a lot of them work really well with the games, but do restrict the modding potential. potential of the games. First, starting with Baldur's Gate 3, the free act design is a huge problem when it comes to modding. For those who haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 before, I don't know how you haven't played this game yet. It's by far one of the best released games ever. But anyway, unlike Skyrim, Baldur's Gate 3 isn't open world in the same sense that you can explore any part of the world at any time. The story is told in 3 parts, and once you've reached certain parts of the story, it locks off the previous areas. Now, when taking a look at Skyrim's mods, many focus on town and overhauls, which poses a challenge when it comes to modding. If you're in Act 3 and wish to download a mod that impacts the previous act, you rather can't use the mod or need to start a new save. It also makes the open world feel much smaller, given that you're only limited to exploring one act at a time. If you look at both games, like a canvas, Baldur's Gate 3 simply has fewer options to play with. Skyrim has 5 major cities, 4 minor cities, and several villages, simply giving modders more options to work with. In comparison, Baldur's Gate 3, 1 to 2 cities per act. The modding canvas is also further limited by the choice of camera Baldur's Gate 3 uses, being top down. I think a big factor that makes Skyrim immersive is the camera. Baldur's Gate 3 at its core is only really interactable from a 2D space, with of course different height terrains being accessible by ladders or jumping simply doesn't compare to the interactivity of Skyrim's camera and being able to freely interact in 3D space, even allowing you to climb mountains. While in Baldur's Gate 3 you can't look at the ceiling, even when you mod the game for a free camera, you can immediately tell that the game was designed to be played with a limited camera. Now you may ask, what's the main drawback of Cyberpunk? It doesn't have a free act system like Baldur's Gate 3, and it has a freeform camera that allows you to look around. The world feels much more explorable in comparison to Baldur's Gate 3. Well, the drawback is actually something that applies to both Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate 3, and it's their main stories. While each game definitely does a really good job of creating interesting side content and detours from a main quest, at the end of the day, they're both still driven by their main quest. I've put in hundreds of hours into Skyrim, and I can say it wasn't until I passed the 100-hour mark that I even completed the main quest. In comparison, I've completed the main quest for both games prior to the 100-hour mark. Looking at the design of Skyrim, the main quest just feels like you've scratched the surface of the game. There's so much more content beyond. I still remember when I first finished the main quest, the feeling I had was along the lines of, alright, another quest completed, let's get back to what I was doing. While with these other games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk, I felt more on the lines of, alright, let me finish off a few side quests and tie up some loose ends before I finish the game. Now, I know some of you may disagree with this point of view and may argue about the content of the games, but I think at its core, Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk was based and designed around their main stories. I couldn't really imagine either game without their main stories. I think we could easily remove the main story of Skyrim and there'll be still a wealth of content available. A huge appeal to Skyrim was how they had so many quest chains beyond the main story. So the best content in Skyrim was within its guild quest. Now the reason I believe Skyrim's endless filling of content versus Cyberpunk and Baldur's Gate's hard stop after the main story is very important to the modding scene, as it really keeps players drawn in. With Skyrim, isn't really a clear end. Yes, there is a main quest, but like I said, it does only scratch the surface. And this really retains modders and really retains players, as the content seems endless in comparison to the other 2 games mentioned. Something that I do want to discuss in this video is if Elder Scrolls 6 doesn't quite hit the mark, what will be the game that will overtake Skyrim and what would it look like? Part of the reason I chose Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk is I actually believe that if a studio is to create a game that would dethrone Skyrim when it comes to modding, assuming that Bethesda doesn't create the game, it is likely going to be one of these 2 studios. Now here's why. On top of being some of the best studios around, both Larian and CDPR has shown interest in modding, with Baldur's Gate 3 and Cyberpunk both having modding support, which is a core reason why they have the communities that they do. Now, between these 2 studios, I think CDPR is more likely to create a game that will overtake Skyrim, as Larian Studios has been and will likely continue creating CRPG, which has a different audience to the type of player that is looking to play a modded Bethesda game. As I previously mentioned before, during the research of this video, there was a lot of content that I could find of others comparing Cyberpunk to a Bethesda game. There was not as many videos that I could find comparing Starfield to Baldur's Gate 3. With the announcement of Cyberpunk Orion once released, I can definitely see Bethesda having some competition. However, there's still one more thing that I need to go over, and that's Bethesda's creation engine versus how Cyberpunk Orion is being developed, which is in the Unreal engine. There's of course a lot of opinions online about whether Bethesda should switch to Unreal, as the creation engine is limiting and holding them back. For those who are unaware, creation engine is designed by Bethesda and was made with the sole purpose of creating a Bethesda game? Well, after doing research on the two engines, I can definitely say the sentiment from modders is the Creation Engine is their choice of Unreal. Benefits of Creation Engine is that the modding capabilities are quite strong, and the engine has already a great modding scene behind it, and a lot of modders who are also very familiar with using the tool. From a modder's perspective, if the Elder Scrolls 6 was not released in the Creation Engine, they would need to relearn a new tool set that may not be able to compete with the Creation Engine's capabilities. Given the next installment of Cyberpunk will be released on the Unreal Engine instead of CDPR's Red Engine, which Cyberpunk 2077 was created on, the modding capacity will certainly be impacted. So we'll have to see the tools that CDPR will release to support the modding community and if they'll compete against the Creation Engine from Bethesda. So going back to our initial question, will Elder Scrolls 6 actually be better than Skyrim? At the end of the day, we will only know once it's released, but let me leave you with 3 scenarios I can see happening. The first is we get something that I'm worried about, and that's another Starfield. A game that's okay, but feels a bit outdated, doesn't really compete with its competition, combat system that's passable, dialogue, questing, and writing which is mediocre, feeling somewhat empty, and not as meaningful as it should. In the second scenario, Bethesda releases a game that's a step up from what some of us have expected. It takes on board a lot of the feedback Starfield receives, creates an impelling game with interesting dialogue, a questing system, and a game that truly feels up to date. In the third scenario, while I'm not gonna hold my breath for it, but it's always good to dream, Elder Scrolls 6 releases as a masterpiece, pretty much the level of Baldur's Gate 3 released in 2023. It takes off all the boxes it needs to, overhauls the gameplay and feels more responsive and engaging, captures the questing and dialogue and story that games like Baldur's Gate 3 has captured, while also sticking to Bethesda's strengths that we saw in Skyrim, having an amazing well-crafted world and staying away from Starfield's approach of procedural generation. If this is something they're able to pull off, we can truly have an amazing game. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe.